All right.
Yeah, baby.
I was like, there we go.
Who did the art here?
Well, I think David did, who does a lot of. Oh, yeah. What is up, theology nerds? This is Tripp. And it's time to nerd out with your geeks out because it is a theology nerd throwdown. And as always, I'm joined by, well, all of our friends in the chat already hopping and bopping. And the one and the only Bo Daddy. What is up, Bo Daddy?
Good morning, sir, and welcome back from the Great White North.
Well, dear friends, this is going to be a special episode for two reasons. One, a number of you started pestering me with messages, and I got tired of trying to give summaries of the just war tradition to clergy that wanted to make sure that what they remembered was accurate, because it appears someone that recently finished Catholic catechism and mastered it to such a degree that he could tell the Pope to get in his place.
Man!
If you're like, maybe I'm missing.
Oh boy,
I forgot what was going on. And then Speaker Mike Johnson of the United States of America, so Christian, he and his adolescent son have an app that, you know, is their accountability partner in case they go to a website with too much cleavage. But I'm not joking. They have an app that tells each other if one of them goes to a site with inappropriate pictures on it, because nothing says learn incognito mode like my dad will get my cookies. But nonetheless, that guy too, and he's Protestant, so it might be his fault, but that it might not be personal, but he too seemed really confused on just war doctrine, and then proceeds to say, we should know, don't you know the just war doctrine? Because there's a time under heaven for everything, like generating the apocalypse and blowing up infrastructure and bridges and, I don't know, women's schools. So there's been some confusion about it. And I had so many people messaging, Bo, that I was like, we're going to have to wait for you to explain the Nephilim to me.
Okay, next week. Next week. You know, Tripp,
I had to call a friend, like, who's written books on just war.
Oh, okay.
We still haven't introduced Kevin. I know I'm good at long intros, Bo.
Yeah, but can I just say,
all right,
because you've come out of the gates with your hair on fire. Can I just say, I don't know that there's confusion. I think maybe you're the one who's confused. I think they've got it right, because you just go to war. That's right. It's just war.
It's
just war.
It's just war. There are times for it. So I messaged my ethicist friend who writes about just war professionally and said, Kevin, couldn't you stop making TikTok videos on Friday morning and come hang out with me and Bo? Y'all get along, and y'all both are strangely warmed on the inside, you know, Methodist style. So you should be friends. Yeah. So Kevin, thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, it's good to be here. So I'm Kevin Carnahan. I'm a professor of philosophy and religion at Central Methodist University. That is, for those who can see the video, I have an eagle on my hat, but that is not because I'm a Philadelphia fan. That is the Central Methodist eagle. I always get that. I get people all the time who respond to me like, "Go Eagles," and I'm like, I don't think you actually know. I don't think you actually
fly, Eagles, fly.
It's not what you think. Yeah, no. Here at Central, we had the cross country team at one point got shirts that said "the Running Eagles," which I was like, that is the worst metaphor ever.
Have you ever seen an eagle run?
Exactly, right? Bad. Like, oh my God, that would be a horrible cross country team. But anyway,
the Running Eagles.
The Running Eagles.
Kevin, it's central to what?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I suppose that we're in Missouri, so we are, in fact, central to the United States in one way or another. Also, we couldn't be Southern because they already had that name, the Southern Methodist, which is where I went to grad school.
Okay.
So, yeah, I just bounce around between different Methodist schools, and
there's a lot of them, though.
There are a lot. That's job security for me right there.
Do you have do you have a bingo card or like a Monopoly board where you say need it, got it, need it?
Yeah,
it's like, have I given a lecture, got a degree,
right?
Given a former student works there. Like, you just have like all these Methodist power ranking points.
Right. I actually have one that says don't go there. So I'm from Kansas originally. I went to grad school in Texas. I've taught in Arkansas and Missouri, but by the grace of God, I've never had to go to Oklahoma. So that's the that's the bingo card that matters for me right there.
I'm just glad you didn't say thank God I never had to go to Claremont, and then Bo and I are just sitting here like,
that would be awkward.
Because I'll just say in North Carolina there are Methodists that go, for all of Duke's problems, at least I didn't go to Claremont. And I'm like, don't even start with me.
So
I can't complain about the Hauerwasian Mafia this early. It'll ruin a Friday.
I am fascinated. I'm fascinated by regional hierarchies.
Yeah.
And like, for instance, my father was the head of the Doctor of Ministry at an evangelical seminary. And but we come from a Wesleyan background. I grew up Free Methodist.
Right.
And so my father used to say, east of the Mississippi, you had to have gone to Asbury to get a job, and west of the Mississippi, you can't get a job if you went to Asbury.
Right, you cannot have gone to Asbury, which has changed now, because now Asbury puts out like, I don't know, 600, 700 new people a year. That's some ridiculous number that they like shoot out into the world. So you can't. It's just overflowing from there. Where our other Methodist schools are not doing as much, unfortunately,
and closing at a pretty consistent rate.
Yeah, no, especially undergraduate school. Don't. Let's not discuss that. I don't want to think about this. Let's sound happier than that. Let's talk about war.
Oh boy,
it's clearly the way to go. So Tripp mentioned, yes, I'm a professional ethicist. I've been the co-editor of the Journal of the Society of Christian Ethics, and I have written extensively on just war theory, including a book that is From Presumption to Prudence in Just War Rationality, which no one should buy and read. It's a very technical and scholarly tome that is mostly filled with really big words for other people who are specialists in the area. But I am familiar with just war theory. And so,
I am familiar with it. And I wrote a book with all the details. But my theory is, if at some point in your life, as a scholar, enough to write a book that is so detailed, you actually don't want anyone to read it.
Yeah.
Then you probably always have the basic cliff notes of the topic in your head. This was
this is the problem. You've got way more. I mean, this is my God, the amount. This is what I immediately, when I get into it, I'm like, well, just war theory. Is it really a theory? And then I like immediately no one wants to talk to me about it.
It can be real triggering to people because evangelicals already have that thing. Like, I forgot about this after not being in the South for a long time, but I've rediscovered it, where they're like, well, evolution is just a theory, and you're like, oh my. I remember homeschool science class. No, I don't, because I went to a real one. Anyway, where you're like, oh, thinking the theories. Yeah, you're like penal substitutionary atonement is just a theory.
So
I guess if it doesn't compute with your deepest convictions about Christianity, you can dismiss it freely and gleefully.
Right. Yeah.
And probably call it a work of Satan.
Well, I get this on critical theory. So
yeah. Well, Bo, let's just say it's dangerous to me. Like, you wrote a book on critical theory. You asked for it.
I have a guy
who's trying to write a book on, like, look, I'm not saying you have to be like a hippy dippy pacifist all the time. I'm just saying don't be cray cray. Right? That's like he's the most moderate position you can have. Like, we don't want to get rid of police. Like, he's not going all ACAB, like, which is probably what you critical theory people do. And he's like, I'm just trying to be the nice mean in the middle that mostly means all the powerful people that decide to go to war. They can't do it if it's just going to kill lots of poor working class people, destroy infrastructure, and make life harder to flourish. Like, I'm just saying, if we don't, I'm just going to not do it that way.
Yeah.
And even that still now these days, who needs that? They have not gone. They haven't read like 2nd Samuel L. Jackson and in the sermon.
Oh my. Hey, Kevin, a question about ethics though, because you mentioned ethics comes with its own distinct vocabulary.
Yep.
Like, so for instance, when I was a visiting professor of theology at George Fox Seminary in Portland, because of what was going on with the transitions of the seminary, they asked, hey, could you add it's a summer class, an intensive on ethics. And because I had studied ethics with Amesbury at Claremont, I was like, yeah, I think I could take that on. But the amount of preparation that it took to get ready to teach a summer intensive on ethics was like, it took almost as much time and energy to get ready to teach that one class as my 4 other classes that summer combined. Like, it comes with just these frameworks like deontological, and like you have to immerse yourself in a completely new language game in order to play the ethics board.
Right. No, I mean, this is why. So in the PhD program that I was in, we had separate tracks for theology and Christian ethics, which has always been a problem because I chose Christian ethics. And then it turns out that nobody wants to give jobs to Christian ethicists because like, they're like, I don't even understand this. What do you do? Do you do theology? And it's like, well, kind of, I do that, but mostly I've studied like politics and ethics. And yeah, so, and especially since Hauerwas. So Hauerwas really ruined it for Christian ethicists because Hauerwas came through and he was like, oh no, Christian ethics is just theology. And at that point, everybody was like, so we just need to hire a theologian then. We don't need anybody who teaches ethics.
He didn't have enough capitalist suspicion that the moment you could reduce a permanent faculty position at a university that's tied to deep endowments and the future debt slavery of its students, that they would eliminate anyone whose vocation is actually articulating the gospel's relationship to material reality and our intersubjective becoming. It's like, let's get rid of that and just have someone police language games and serve the Eucharist every Sunday. and capitalist America and its imperialist powers.
Oh boy.
Because 3 Sundays in a row serving the Eucharist and making sure you name God, Father, Son, and Spirit, American flags disappear. I learned that from Duke.
Wow.
Yeah.
There.
Kevin,
I got going early today, Bo.
You did.
I
can tell.
I told Kevin we were going to save our 40-minute intro for after we talked about just war.
Okay.
So that, maybe the plan's backfiring, but you know what I mean. That was what I said.
You should have told me that. I didn't know that, and I have come with so many things. Kevin, let me just
say, Bo's usually in charge. Kevin,
which
really whatever he says.
I have you do whatever you want.
All I know is when I realized that y'all didn't know each other, I was like, this is an even better idea because I have like really good. Which of your friends would be friends with other friends? And now I'm like really confident that at Theology Beer Camp, I'll catch y'all having a beer together. And Bo being like, can you show me how to TikTok? And
I'm gonna follow Kevin around, and because I think I'm a little taller than you, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna stand right behind you and try and intimidate the people who are asking you the conundrums, and then periodically I'll just reach across your shoulder and just poke them.
Yeah,
poke them.
So you'll be like Tripp's rooster. Is that the Tripp's chicken that's popping up behind him every once in a while?
Man, I'd be Tripp's rooster any day of the week, man.
Cock-a-doodle Bo.
Okay, now I don't really want to know what I'm doing.
But can I just say, I love your Hauerwas story. Can I just say, I have the opposite problem in my field, which is practical theology, which is that everyone already assumes they know what it is. In evangelical circles, it's the practice of ministry, like how to preach homiletics. But in more mainline circles, we have to be like, well, we use qualitative methods, and people, they tune out. Like I hate when we're at AAR and we're at one of those cocktail hours. I hate trying to explain the field of practical theology. No one knows what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do. I think at Protestant places, oftentimes they don't really understand why they need somebody to teach theology or ethics, because they just figure they need somebody to teach Bible. Like, if we teach the Bible, aren't we really done? Like, haven't we really covered everything?
That's
and it's like
very interesting.
There is like 2,000 years after that of development and theology and like I don't know if you knew this, but yeah, no, it's a Protestant problem, right?
Wow.
Like Luther just came through and was like, let's go back just scripture alone. And people didn't do that because you can't do that, right? Everybody's reading the scripture through some lens that came from afterwards, but pretty much made people ignorant about the fact that they're reading it through lenses that come from afterwards and theology that came from afterwards. And yeah, no, I mean, that's a real problem.
That's so interesting
across the board.
This past week in Sunday school, I introduced people to nominalism.
Yeah.
Because I said, you don't know that this
it gets people pumped. That, like, when I think of what gets me pumped at Sunday school,
it's just like
nominalism.
But here's the thing.
Well, what's next? Are you gonna dramatically read Duns Scotus quotes?
But here's what happened. I said to him, you don't know this, but this is operational at the Idaho legislature in the 21st century, and you don't know that it's an app running in the background right now.
Right. No, that's exactly right. Because well, again, bringing this back to Oklahoma, when I try and explain to my students, like, why did they have an argument in Oklahoma about whether we need a statue of the 10 Commandments out in front of the court system? And the answer is, well, it's because there's this fairly recent theory in Christian ethics that, like, law comes from the particular commands of God, right? As opposed to the more classical idea that God just is goodness and doesn't command particular things, but just is goodness, and everybody can access that. No, it's about God's particular commands, and that's where the law comes from. And like, yeah, and my students, I mean, I don't know that they care. But at the end of the day, it's like, no, these arguments actually make a difference. Like, this is why somebody like took their truck and ran over a statue of the 10 Commandments in Oklahoma, is because there are arguments about this stuff that are, like, on the one hand, really hardcore philosophical arguments, and on the other hand, about a truck running over a statue, which is, get both of those things.
Wow.
One of the things that, especially setting up the public discourse around Christianity and war, you would think that Christians who want there to be at least some conditions that could legitimate a Christian using force that includes death, they really want the field of ethics. Otherwise, they might be stuck with the options in the early church, because they were stuck just reading Jesus.
Yeah.
So, like, Kevin, maybe you can, like, because the people that are like, oh, we just need the Bible, are also the ones that, the moment you ask about war, are like, well, we actually just need Joshua.
Yeah. Right.
So, like, what's
where
that
you're pulling from in the Bible makes a big amount of difference to that, right? Because if you're pulling from Jesus, you're probably in trouble if you want to justify war in any way. I mean, I do think that Christianity is weird on this, right? Because it's a tradition that has a whole bunch of tensions in it, that are built in part from the beginning, because we have from the Old Testament, like places where, it's about the nation of Israel, and they're engaged in defense and offense, and at times apparent genocide, going through the Old Testament. And then you get to Jesus, who is an apocalyptic preacher, pretty much believes that, the world's coming to an end and you better stand with righteousness. And that means not participating in any of this stuff, right? Not engaging in violence in any form. And of course, he has no interest whatsoever in, like, government or what would happen if a Christian were in charge, because that's just not a realist. I mean, Jesus doesn't imagine that happening. He's picturing that we're living in the last days before the end of the world, and what matters is love and righteousness, and live it up to the fullest. And that's the way things are going to go. And then Christians have to figure out afterwards, what are we supposed to do given that things have gone on, that the world keeps going? And then when Christians like do get into government, okay, what are if we aren't allowed to use any violence whatsoever, how do you maintain order? And how does that work? And so, no, you need the Christian tradition to kind of try and figure out and put forward different things. And the Christian tradition then ends up just full of, I mean, contradictions and tensions. And this is exactly why you end up with like multiple Christian positions on war. Why you have pacifists on the one hand, why you have just war thinkers kind of in the middle, and why you have these kind of crazy crusaders.
What about Islamophobic apocalyptic millenarians?
Yeah,
a deep attachment to the military-industrial complex and the undermining of nation states through the utilization of cryptocurrency.
Yeah, so I believe that there need to be some standards on what counts as Christianity at all. So I'm just going to be like, nah, that's no. I mean, this is.
But have you actually listened to all of Peter Thiel's lecture series on the Antichrist? Because it blew my mind.
I believe that it would blow your mind, maybe in a way that you could never get it back again. That's entirely possible.
Wow. He loves Lord of the Rings. That's why he named surveillance state company Palantir.
Right, because he's intimately familiar with the mythology and knew the implications. Of that.
It's like, tell me you didn't read Lord of the Rings while pretending you read Lord of the Rings. Oh, like the giant surveillance state, obviously to help everybody. Access to knowledge that creeps on the basic freedoms that are required for an interiority of a subject to preserve the structures of deliberative democracy. To undermine that whole thing, I'm going to name it Palantir because I love Tolkien so much. Because what could go wrong?
Yeah.
Tripp, what if we had a company named BOMB Bombadil?
Yeah, and they're like, oh, finally, we got a real company that blows stuff up, and the company's just indifferent to every contract it takes from the military. It's indifferent to the military, like Bombadil is to the ring. They're like, you can't trust this guy with the ring. You'll forget about it,
right,
and just leave it sitting around.
Right, our company will take your nuclear weapons and look at them.
Wow.
You'd be like, huh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Might lose them later on, but whatever.
So, okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I'm on the much more radical Reformation side of Baptist life, who's also a process person. So that also sets you up to like nonviolence goes all the way down to the structure of the universe.
Right.
That which actually is Howard Watts' best line about the grain of the universe. It's actually true metaphysically, and he thinks it's a language game. So I mean it more than he does. But let's imagine you're like, whoa, well, we do have different vocations that the early church didn't think a follower of Jesus or disciple would have. How do we think through responsible use of power? Like, is there some reason, let's say that a pope who is, I don't know, Augustinian, who like, is there like, why would we trust an Augustinian pope to have some basic awareness of the just war tradition?
Just war theory. Okay, so let's put this all in context. There's a beef between the Pope and Trump in a so the Pope, in a very kind of paying attention to politics, knowing things, he's articulated a basic Christian position, being that, hey, war in general, not a good thing. Quoting like, God doesn't listen to the prayers of those who are going to war. Trump, hearing this, I think accurately, as a critique of the Trump administration and Trump's war against Iran, and a series of things actually that Trump's done, like Venezuela and other places like that. And so you get like JD Vance and Mike Johnson coming back and being like, but the Pope's forgetting about just war theory. This just indicates that they don't understand Catholic social teaching and that they don't understand just war theory at all. And I'd like, so to be careful between the two. Catholic social teaching is an actual thing that evolves over time. Okay. So in the Catholic Church, it was just war theory, just war kind of criteria were articulated by like Thomas Aquinas back in the medieval period. And there was a kind of version of just war thinking that was engaged at that time. Since then, Catholic thinking about war has evolved, has changed, especially in the 1960s. You had John the 23rd, who wrote a papal encyclical, Pacem in Terris, peace on the earth. And his argument there was that in the modern period, a couple of things had shifted in politics. Number one, war had become a lot more dangerous because of nuclear weapons. And he said, look, we're basically at the point where engaging in war could be engaging in like the destruction of almost the entirety of the human race. So war has actually gotten worse, right? And then he said, and another thing that's happened is there's a greater possibility for like engagement across nations, because we have things like the League of Nations, the United Nations, like the possibilities for us finding peace have gotten much bigger. And so at that point, the Catholic Church doesn't get rid of just war theory, but modifies its position to say, look, just war would only be acceptable. Like you could only really go to war in really extreme circumstances, where there's no way to work it through the UN, where the danger is really monumental. And so the Catholic Church from the 1960s forward basically doesn't give up on just war theory, but moves it much closer to pacifism in practice. Because it becomes, they articulate the criteria of just war theory in a way that it would be almost impossible to actually get a justification for war. And Pope Leo, he chose the name Leo because Pope Leo before him was like the father of a lot of these developments in Catholic social thinking. Like Leo, back from Rerum Novarum, which is his big papal encyclical, was like the starting point for a whole bunch of this modern rethinking and moving of Catholic thought. So the idea that Leo doesn't know the tradition is absurd. And Leo knows it, and he knows how it's evolved. And that is exactly what he's doing. And that's why modern popes, really regardless of which one, if you go back to John Paul or if you go back to Benedict, regardless of whether in the United States we would consider them conservative or liberal or whatever, they have all been peace popes. They have all been like pushing for, in every case, the being against war in just about every situation. So they have taken, and I think that that's probably a good thing. I think we want in the Christian tradition a constant voice that reminds us of like the radical vision that Jesus, and I say that as a person who is a Christian realist. I mean, I believe that there are times when you can have justified wars, but I, as a person who thinks that that's true, always want the Pope reminding me, like, but do you really need to be doing this? Is this really what needs to happen? I mean, in classical Christian thought, even when you went on a just war, you came back and you did penitence, right? I mean, you came back and it was never just enough to have it like, oh no, it's a righteous war. Nah, that wasn't that wasn't really a thing. You had to say, okay, it might be acceptable, but we recognize that you're still getting your hands dirty when you do it. And so everybody who I think wants to represent just war theory should be appreciative of a kind of pacifist voice that's going to be pushing all the time in that direction. And that's exactly what the Pope is doing, is he's representing a particular version of just war theory, which is very strenuous. And in that, I think these guys don't know like Catholic thought. They also don't know just war theory more generally,
or the Bible. I think that's
or the Bible. This is, I mean, because just war theory. They aren't following just war theory. That's absurd.
Are you saying that a just war theorist may not be funding the Israeli military state, regardless of how it uses what you sell to it?
Right. Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? That maybe it's not a just war just to go and bomb a foreign country for no national interest and pretty much at the behest of another country that just has it as a war of choice that they're actually interested in doing. No, I mean, this is the thing. I really think at the end of the day, so in Christianity, we, as I said, we got like pacifists, we got just war thinkers, and then we've got kind of crusaders, right? The crusaders are those that imagine themselves as justice in the world, and everybody else is like evil, and you should just be destroying other people. So if we go through the Trump administration, I think like Trump just doesn't fit any of these. Trump, I don't say this as a partisan thing. I say this simply as a scholar. I don't think Trump has had any concern about ethics at any point in his, I don't know that he's ever had or would understand what it would be to have like a thought about morality come into his head. I don't know that he's ever.
Well, he did say he doesn't know anything he needs to repent for.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think Trump.
That sounds like a trustworthy person to put in charge of the world's largest military.
Trump's
like he can't even like say, well, I did lose my cool one time when I was sleep deprived from the child I conceived with my second wife while my first wife was pregnant. Like he could have at least said that.
I don't think that. Nah. This is very. So Augustine says even the saints have evil thoughts, right? But Trump.
Well, he told us about his.
Yeah, he did.
He was like, I have so many. I'm going to invent a spiritual autobiography as a new
where I'm
genre of literature.
All about my evil thoughts.
Man, let me tell you about this apple. It is a naughty, naughty apple, and I just want to seize that apple.
Right.
And then
no reason.
And you're like, this is a little weird, right? Like about that fruit. But then, it gets a little bit later, and the apple switches to some ladies, and he's just like, I'm going to give you some details about how filthy a sinner I am. This reminds me of the grace of God, but let me tell you about my filthy sinniness. And then see, Protestants, they don't know that when they tell stories at their accountability group at the Baptist Student Union, they're actually performing a genre that Augustine invented. Gossip in the form of prayer requests and confession in the form of bragging.
I mean, and the ways that they think about sex are mostly Augustinian, not actually.
Like, how Jesus is. It's like for everything he says about war and mammon, he has at least 20 verses about sex. Everyone knows that when they've read the New Testament. Jesus is just going on about penis here, penis there, no nasty thoughts, and then occasionally he's like, don't hurt anybody, don't spend too much money on yourself. But really, if you, like Mike Johnson or the head of the House of Representatives, if you could invent an app that is always creeping up on your phone and your kids, then y'all can share it. That you've heard it said, don't look at porn, But I say unto you, when you do, make sure your dad and your kid knows about it. It's in the Sermon on the Mount.
Your kid's porn. That's
Yeah.
That's what I'm really saying here.
And he's like, but make sure you don't put a thumbs up or thumbs down option in the app, because the last thing you need to do is start.
I approve of. Okay, well, I mean, it's wrong, but this
if you're
is
gonna
best
sin,
that I've seen. I'm just saying.
Sin, what was sin boldly, son? Sin boldly. Oh, I love, one of my favorite things when I derail like this is watching Bo's face, who decides if he's going to contribute or if he's going to intervene.
That's exactly what's happening. I'm trying. Well, so here, just let me say, before you went on that last side rail, I was going to confess some naughty thoughts I was having.
Oh, well, this is a safe space.
It's past now.
It's a safe space. It's just between me, you, and 180 people that are on the stream.
Yeah.
When you were talking about confession as a, performative biography, honestly, I mean, you both clearly know, but in those accountability groups, like if you have a college men's group, sometimes, honestly, the confessions do get out of hand.
Oh yeah. There are whole channels on TikTok that are devoted to like high school ministers, like sharing their stories about like stuff that got out of hand. Oh, it's watching a train wreck every time.
Dude, wow. Okay, picking up on that theme, and then Bo, you're gonna say something to redirect us to the topic. But right. You know how like 2 or 3 weeks ago we were talking about algorithms, and I said, one of the hard things if you're a youth minister for 15 years is, you're friends with all of your students and stuff on Instagram, and then they go to college, and then they have prolonged adolescence, and then the algorithm's like, you have a thing for people 15 years younger than you, so all of our suggested things for you are going to be other people you don't know of that age at sorority parties or whatever, and you're just like, stop showing this to me. So we joked about this. I've had 6 or 7 former youth ministers message me and be like, dude, that is so real. You just keep saying, no, I don't want to see this, but I do want to see the people I know. Yeah. But if you could like only show me the pictures when they're like talking about life updates or them with their dogs or family and not at parties with very little clothes on,
that would be cool.
Yeah. I mean, just think there'd be a whole new chapter in the Confessions if Augustine had a smartphone.
If Augustine had a smartphone, he would never have become Saint Augustine. That's me.
That is tweetable. That is fantastic.
Man, yeah.
I did want to go back, Kevin. You mentioned something about the Crusades. You mentioned the Crusaders. I am fascinated with what happened in the Protestant Reformation related to the ethics of war and violence. Mm-hmm. So, the stories that come out of not just the wars of religion in Germany, but Geneva specifically, and Calvin's approach versus the pacifists and the peace churches. I'm curious. Why don't you think that gets more press in our Christian history, especially as Protestants? Or do you think, I'm suspicious that what we're dealing with now is really a remnant, sort of zombie categories that are left over from that window of time?
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right that like, well, there are 2 streams of it. There's a Calvinist stream, and then there's a kind of Pentecostal stream that, unfortunately, as Wesleyans, we do have to have some responsibility for. There are these 2 streams that come out of the Protestant Reformation. So just to summarize here, right? You get on the one hand peace churches. There are these churches that during the Reformation really do try and reclaim the kind of radicality of the early church and say, we are going to live in the kingdom right now. And so that actually goes in 2 different directions, because you do have peace churches, And then you have some that are like, okay, what that means is, as opposed to the peace churches, we need to get rid of all of the evil. And if that means killing people to do it, we'll do it.
Oh.
And so there are some of
like
those
Moonster
that actually
style?
pop up. What's that?
Like Moonster style?
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is you get both of those like radical options coming out of that. You get the Lutheran, which is like, no, okay, hold on, slow down. We're going to divide out like worldly concerns from ecclesial concerns, and the government shouldn't have anything to do with like enforcing this stuff, right? That was also served Luther fairly well because he didn't want the emperor coming and killing him. And then you have Calvinists who adopt a position where they say, nah, look, here's what should happen is the government should just listen to the church for what it should do. And that should be the basic way of working all this out. And I do think today we have like on the right, there's a strain of Calvinism that comes through, very kind of puritanical version of that pushes. Then more recently, there is this Pentecostal in the New Apostolic Reformation stuff that comes out that I mean, so in a weird way, it's like conservatives are always worried about like cultural Marxism, right? They talk about like the cultural Marxists are trying to take over everything. What's weird is that's actually it's what the evangelicals are doing in the New Apostolic Reformation, the kind of stuff that Mike Johnson is like involved in. The idea is that these evangelical Christians should come and take over the whatever it is, the 7 mountains of culture, and they should dominate those, and they should make everything have a Christian basis for it. And they imagine that's basically getting rid of everything else. So I do think that a lot of what we have today, right, is an upshot of the Reformation. I think in its worst form, it gets mixed together with this kind of evangelical toxic masculine stuff. I see people online all the time who think of themselves as hardcore Christians and have like Knights Templar pictures on their screens. And like, this is what they mean by Christianity is we should be out killing the heretic, right? We should be out destroying the evil in the world, which is weird. I mean, to me, as a kind of Christian scholar, it's like, well, I've seen that kind of thing in Christian history, but it's a radical fringe thing that ends up confusing yourself with God and going out and dealing with evil. Whereas, you know, there was this whole thing in early Christianity, like vengeance is the Lord's. Don't. That's not your job to do that. That's not your job to bring that about. Right. So yeah. And I think this gets back to, so I would say like Trump, I don't think he fits into the Christian framework at all. I do think that there are people like Hegseth who definitely they conceive of themselves as kinds of crusaders. They kind of picture the world as good and evil, and they imagine that they are the good ones. And as soon as you do that, the world is just black and white, and what you're justified in doing, the violence that you're justified in bringing upon the world is pretty much unlimited because you're out to get rid of the evil stuff and you're just good. And it's just, it melds together with this kind of John Wayne picture of what the masculine man is supposed to be and all of this stuff. And we end up with, a mess in foreign affairs. And when you put this, you can kind of see it when they renamed the Department of Defense, the Department of War. And it's just like, oh my God, where are we going with this? It's crazy.
You know, we now look back a little more fondly on George W. Bush as president because he seems moderate compared to what we're dealing with today. But
like, you think that he probably lost a little bit of sleep after war crimes?
Oh my gosh. But
I mean, I don't know if I've really reevaluated my opinion of him yet.
Really? Okay.
Go back to George H.W. Bush. Then.
Okay.
Would that be better?
Didn't he run the CIA?
Well, I mean, that was before he was president.
So before he was president, he was given orders to
Yeah.
undermine democratically elected leaders in the global South so that we could use the World Trade Organization to annex large parts of land after we undermined banks so that our multinational companies could own them, get rid of 2/3 of the labor, industrialize their fields, and then tell them it's their responsibility that they have mass poverty and starvation.
Yeah, I mean, of course, but
Yeah, well,
I mean,
given
what are you
that-
expecting?
Well,
Okay, hey, let me
I'm-
make a case.
Well,
Let me make
I
a
know.
little
What are you
case
expecting?
towards
You're
H.W.
expecting us to be sinners all the time, Kevin.
Yeah, sin boldly. No, I'm not advocating for that. What I would say, let me make a little case for George H.W. Bush. Probably the last clear case of actually just war, like theory actually being applied, would be the first Iraq War.
Wow.
Would be the invasion of Iraq in the 1990s, where you had, so just war theory usually has, you have to have a just cause to go to war, some event that's happened that is a violation of like international standards, and you've got to have limitations of your goals, your aims in war, and you're not supposed to like kill non-combatants, on purpose and stuff like that. If you go back to the first Iraq War, like Saddam Hussein in Iraq had invaded Kuwait, right? Basically, no justification for that. He wanted their oil, he wanted their power, he'd invaded. The rest of the world said, hey, that's not cool. You can't just invade another country for no reason. They got together. There was a massive number of countries. You had support from other Middle Eastern countries, from Europe, from the United Nations, from like all that stuff. The United States participates in a multilateral invasion that pushes Iraq back out of Kuwait, and then does a really fantastic thing. They stop. They weren't like, we're going to push this until we destroy Saddam Hussein. We're going to rid it, right? No, they push him back into Iraq. And then they say, and in part, this was, I think Bush might have gone further, except for that the coalition was like, nah, I don't think we can. But to his credit, at that point, he was like, no, all right, let's call the war good then. We've achieved the goals that we wanted to achieve. And the United States backs out of Iraq. And like in context, there are very few wars that fit as cleanly inside of a kind of just war theory as that does. And in part, like George W. Bush, what he messes up is he thinks that he's going to finish with something that never needed finishing, because it was a use of force that followed the basic rules. And he thinks, oh no, we should have gone further. We should have taken out Saddam Hussein. And so now he goes back and, following on his stuff, he basically makes what was a just war into an unjust war by going back in the 2000s to finish something that was already done, that had been completed. And so that would be my case, that HW was actually better than W, and honestly, both of them are better than Trump in many ways. Although I would agree that like the second Iraq War was a freaking mess and one of the worst mistakes in American history.
Yeah, but so like here's the situation I think we're in, that like even the second Iraq War. I have a couple friends who served there and in Afghanistan multiple times, one of which is a JAG officer, so like a lawyer, to make sure
it's important to get to the end of that JAG officer. That's really important to get to the.
Well, Augustine would.
Okay, I was really worried about what you were going to say about your friend, but go ahead.
Yeah, a military lawyer.
Yeah,
and like we lost more soldiers than necessary for the simple reason that we enforced rules for the protection of citizens in Iraq, and when held people accountable legally that broke it. And Hegseth and Trump were like, that's bad, and we pardon these people who committed war crimes, where their own soldiers in the unit are like, this guy, war criminal.
Yeah.
And so like part of it is like we aren't even doing we aren't following our own rules of engagement.
Yeah.
And we're imitating Israel's, which have continued to get worse over time, right?
Yeah.
And which people are interested. Kevin and I had a long conversation about that, I don't know, like a year ago, where you kind of laid out how it's changed over time. But like even like we are now we don't think there's some form of integrity once you say go.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're like part of what the just war tradition, when it's internalized, even if it's not done well, is that like under the conditions where you've decided this is necessary, not for the bottom line of a country or the billionaires' investments or data centers or access to oil, but for the well-being of people. And even if you don't like the judgment and think someone put Colin Powell up to a lie fest, that he felt betrayed, but assuming even basic good faith, we went above and beyond what we, in the actual enactment to have some kind of integrity in the way we related, that now that looks like the holiest thing we've ever done, because we're so far past it that we're just like, I'm going to let an algorithm confuse a school named after a general with a military base and blow it up.
Yeah.
And as someone whose kid goes to General Green Elementary, I'm like, I don't want this being something we now do that then everyone gets to do it because the leader of the free world was like, oh, my bad, Claude got a little confused.
Yeah.
I don't need no AI hallucination wiping out schools and then not even acting like you did it or that it was a problem.
Yeah. No, so I entirely agree with this. I think it's been a slow slide from like that time, like the first Iraq War on through. So you had George W. Bush, who then I think didn't have a secure justification for going to war in the second Iraq War. And yes, was still very concerned about the targeting of civilians, but then started doing things that were basically torture on the side as well, right? And so started violating some of the just war standards. Enhanced interrogations, right?
Enhanced interrogations.
Right. This is part of the rhetorical battle that you get involved in.
Oh, I will say one funny Howard Ross line, this is fully endorsing, is that enhanced interrogations is as close to torture as an evangelical that said, I'm a virgin because we've only done anal. He's like, that is the logic of nationalism.
And I think that's fair. So I
he loves theology with analogy. So
I think by the time we got to George W. Bush, the Republican administrations were not very much interested in like just war theory outside of, I do think that they were worried about targeting civilians. This is, if anything, like one of the strongest things that we should be able to agree on in just war theory is that you're not going to target civilians. I think that by the time you get to the Trump administration, that's just really out. You've given up on all of the standards of just war theory. I don't think we're in a situation where we have a just cause for the war, and I don't think that we're following just standards inside the war. The Trump administration, when it got in, basically dismantled. There was a whole section of the government that had been developed in order to avoid targeting civilians. Like that was their job. And Trump, one of the first things in the middle of all the cutting of jobs that they did, went through and just cut out that whole section of the government that was invested in developing better strategies, better ways to avoid excessive harms in war. And Hegseth has openly said that the problem was that we were trying to avoid lethality, right, in war. And his picture of war, again, I just don't think that he's concerned about those things. He's not concerned about the rules, which is what makes it so strange for Mike Johnson and JD Vance to be like, oh, I think the Pope has forgotten just war theory. It's like, you guys have no interest in Christian just war thinking. Like, this is not something you're doing. We hit a school which, whether we intended to or not, the fact that we have removed the elements from our government that are providing strategies to help avoid that kind of thing makes us culpable. We have targeted civilian infrastructure. So there was a bridge that Trump live videoed the thing where we were hitting this bridge that killed 8, civilians on the bridge, injured hundreds more, destroyed a bridge that is not fighting against us. I mean, the thing is, this is a bridge that they just need for life. And you can't, this is not acceptable. But probably in international law, and certainly in terms of the morality of war, the targeting of like civilian infrastructure. And of course, Trump, I think, would just like to go much further with that, if we can believe the things that he says. He's tweeting about, he wants to destroy their whole civilization and bomb them back into the Stone Age, and basically advocating genocide, which, if you're doing that, you're not interested in just war theory. That is not actually something that you're engaging with at all. So I'd just say, I mean, their statements about like just war theory are they're performative. As is often the case, I think they want to give themselves enough of a fig leaf. I suppose there's an irony in the metaphor of fig leaf, like Adam and Eve covering themselves with leaves after sinning, right? They want to give themselves enough fig leaf that they can, confuse kind of a group of their followers who don't know enough into thinking that, they must actually know what they're talking about. And it's like, anybody who actually knows the tradition or the history is just like, no, that makes no sense whatsoever. Like claiming just war theory when you're talking about what you're doing right now. It doesn't work at all.
I mean, I'm so deeply troubled. I know we try and keep the show light because it's a throwdown and we like to have fun, but this is deeply troubling stuff. 2 follow-up questions. So when I initially brought up George W., the reason, as I've been listening, so until 2008, Kevin, I was committed evangelical. I was really, really into it.
Yeah.
And when I started to migrate through the emerging church conversation and found my way down to Claremont, I was introduced to all sorts of concepts and vocabulary words that I'd never heard before. And I was truly shocked at how protected I had been within the evangelical bubble from things. Like, for instance, people would talk about George W. They would say things like, Janus faced. I had never heard I had no idea what the hell that was. Or a Manichaean worldview. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, it's not just that I don't agree. I don't understand. I don't even know what you're saying,
Right.
And so, but when you talk about like warriors of the light, right, eliminating the forces of darkness and that sort of self-validating crusader concept of we are assumed to be right. And there's only 2. You're either with us or against us.
Right.
You're either with the light or you're a force of darkness, right? And that kind of self-posturing and justification for whatever your actions might be so permeate and just are assumed within certain subcultures that, they're not even aware that these concepts are operational, but they so deeply influence what they find permissible in their leaders and politicians. So anyway, that's why I had brought it up. I just would be curious if you have anything to.
No, I think that that's absolutely right. And I do think that there's a a group of evangelicals. So John Sanders has a good book that's on like the nurturant God versus the kind of authoritarian God, and like looks at metaphors in scripture and looks at the ways that this works out in theology. And I do think that one thing that he hooks onto in there is that like the language we use, the metaphors we use, the ways that we think about God shape how we see ourselves and the world. And that in evangelicalism, there is this kind of, so it's an apocalypticism in the way that they picture the world as like good and evil, and there's going to be some like major battle between good and evil. And some of them are taking this very literally, right? You can see people who are talking about like, oh, Iran is involved in this. And this is actually like the outworking of, you can see in the Bible, there are these prophecies that are going to happen. And what's actually happening is this kind of, this world is coming along at the end. And they're so involved in that, I think that they just think, okay, this is Christianity. This is what, this is what Christianity is. They're unfamiliar with any other version of Christianity. And so they think, oh yeah, this must be what faithful Christianity looks like. And they're unaware, like Jesus was apocalyptic, but had a totally different form of apocalypticism, where Jesus says, yes, we're living in the end of the world. And this is why we should be acting entirely righteous ourselves, not participating in violence, not doing any of that stuff, right? He was apocalyptic, but in a very different kind of apocalypticism. And then there's these whole traditions that have kind of mediated and figured out, okay, how can we live this out in the world where things are much more gray, things are much more complicated than apocalypticism often assumes at the beginning of time. And I do think that there are a lot of evangelicals who are just in that bubble so much that they don't realize that there are other forms of Christianity, there are other forms of other ways of putting this stuff together. Wow. And I don't know, this is a problem, and it's becoming more and more of a problem, because how do you even engage with the person that's in that bubble? And how do you, because the bubble develops kind of layers of defense against people from the outside, right? They are the people that are the darkness, so you shouldn't be listening to them. And, you should listen to God instead of reason. So even if they sound really reasonable, don't accept that, right? And you get this, and it becomes, it's a very cult-like kind of dynamic. And the how to break into that and actually get to people there and be like, look, I get that you think you're doing Christianity, but what you're doing is actually, in the breadth of Christianity, really weird, really modern, actually, like a way that people have not. It's only possible after the Reformation and after the Counter-Reformation and all of that, and and try and actually convince people of that. As a person who makes TikToks, makes Instagram reels, right, and does this stuff, it's a constant problem, because oftentimes you'll end up engaging with somebody. I was thinking the other day, you can't educate a student who's so ignorant that they think they're the teacher. So like if you've got somebody and you're like, no, that's not really how this works, and let me try and explain it to you, and they're like, oh no, let me explain it to you, and it's like, okay.
Like maybe you've only been Catholic 7 years and you wrote a book about your conversion to Catholicism with a Methodist church on the front,
on the cover,
and then you have imbibed Catholicism so much that you feel justified in telling the Pope to dial back that theology talk.
Yeah, no, exactly. Although I honestly, with JD Vance, I never know what his actual position is, right? I think Vance
it's not till he calls Peter Thiel to find out.
Yeah, no, I kind of think Vance, because I always want, I mean, this is just an interesting thing to me. And it would have been an interest, right? Like all of this stuff about Trump could have just been like a parlor game, fun discussion of his, like his dispositions when he was on reality TV, right? And it would have been like, has Donald Trump ever had a moral thought? I don't know. This is an interesting discussion, right? There were actually, I like, so there's a philosopher named Annis who does like classical philosophy. And in a book that was before Trump was like elected, she's doing a thing about like character and the fact that like in Aristotle, we have people that we look up to, and we like, we, you know, you can surround yourself with like pictures of the saints. You can surround yourself. And she just, as an aside, says, this is something nobody would do with anybody like, I don't know, Donald Trump, right? You would never put this person as somebody who's supposed to be emulated. And, you know, and it was just so the obvious choice, right? This is like Trump's kind of like a cartoon villain. Nobody would ever take that as their exemplar for what's going on. And that kind of discussion, I think it's just like, that just would have been interesting. It would have been interesting to discuss, does Trump have a conscience, or does he just, as I kind of think he does, like Trump just has things that he wants. And the question that he asks is anybody going to stop me? I think that that's where like Trump's like functional. And I think in this case, he was like, yeah, nobody's going to stop me from doing this. I think that for the most part, he's got like Netanyahu and Israel, which has been pushing pushing Iran back. Iran is one of their regional opponents, and they see an opportunity where it's like, Iran is really weak right now. We might be able to finish this off and just not have them as an opponent anymore. And they were talking to Trump. Trump's like, you know what? I don't like Iran. Sure. Like, okay, let's bomb them. And I think that that's how Trump works, is pretty much, is anybody going to stop me? I don't think they are. All right, let's do it.
You know, Kevin, I know there's always an exception that proves the rule, and I just need to go on record by saying in Nelly's 2000 song, Country Grammar, he actually does look up to Donald Trump, and I just want to quote. So,
okay,
he says, "Now I'm knocking like Jehovah. Let me in now. Let me in now. Bill Gates, Donald Trump, let me in now." So I just, for the record, he did surround. Yeah.
You know, as a philosopher, it's hard to read all the other philosophers. So it's true. There's always danger that one of them, like Nelly, is gonna slip by me. Yeah, clearly. And Nelly, famous as a moral philosopher as well. Really.
That's a real blind spot there, Kevin. It just
for all the rest of us.
Oh my Lord!
So, one of the things, when I was teaching a undergrad class, it was supposed to be, you know, an ethics elective, and so I'm using pop culture and stuff to talk about it. And when this was like before COVID, so like the reference point was the previous Iraq War.
Yeah,
but I use Lord of the Rings to talk about all the different kind of like, because like one of the things the just war tradition is saying, like, even if you're in a situation where maybe your vocation or role or place within the state means there's a kind of responsibility that makes like equivocal fidelity to Jesus' teachings a like difficult thing to think through, like you still have to think through it, and you should what the just war tradition behind it is like very much got that Gandalf energy, you know, where they're at the council or he's talking to Frodo, like, oh, he should have just killed could have killed Smeagol a while ago. And he does the, you know, many that deserve death live, you know, and some that die deserve life. But his response is, can you give it to them? And if you can't, then don't be too eager to hand out death and judgment, right? And there's this, and underneath it, it's like he's affirming the inherent value of life, and that it like the idea that you get to be the one that stands and judge is, both of those are above your pay grade. Like, you don't have the ability to inscribe less value on another person, and you don't have the standpoint to be the ultimate decision maker of justice. Or in American history, think of like Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, who's, I'm not sure which side God's on, but I want to be on that side, right? And there's this struggle throughout the whole thing, and get beautiful reflections on it, the Gettysburg Address. But now I think we're being ran by Denethor, who is the whole time bitter about what Gondor has or hasn't done, and then is like, oh, the rings, the rings appeared, I'm gonna go send my son to go steal this junk. And underneath it, right, is he's like, I am the protector of Gondor. This is my vocation till the king comes back, which I'm obviously against the king ever coming back, but nonetheless, like, and then you see it in his kid's not Faramir, the good son, the internalize the deep value of the other, who even right after the Easterlings are killed, he questions Sam and Frodo, like, you don't know why they're here. Most of the people that go to war go because they're ordered to by their king. So like the idea you're judging them is just kind of crazy. That's the Message translation of a beautiful passage in Lord of the Rings. But like Denethor and then Boromir had this sense like, this is our job. So now what do we want? We want the tool of the enemy to leverage against it. And that's a solution. It's that kind of thinking that the just war tradition just goes, the moment you go into Denethor thought, you've missed the point, because you're now sitting in a space where you think destructive tools of power, denial of the inherent value of the other, and you privilege your space of knowing such that you can legitimate what you're doing. Then we find out, what was Denethor doing? He had a palantir, and he's sitting there, and yet he's getting visions of what's true, but he's only getting the visions of truth that Sauron wants him to see. And I find that to be like the best example of half the Church of America. They got the palantir going on, and they're only seeing the clips of reality that justify their sweeping, contemptuous dismissal of the people of Iran or Palestinians, or I don't know, a mother in Minnesota, or these kinds of things. And that like it turned into one of the most, like fruitful conversations in the class. And then you get, like the real nonviolent example of Tom Bombadil, who's just like indifferent to the whole thing. Like, I'm not even messing with this, but the whole story is brilliant because you get, the army of men marching on the gate, but it's all running in interference for the ring undoing itself. And you get, if you read the appendices, the dwarves up in the north, one of the big Nazgul riding dark rider shows up, and they're like, we'll give you your dwarvish ring back if you want to join. And they're like, no basket. And then all the goodies would have got ran over if the dwarves weren't having a giant war saying, we're not taking this power. We know what this does to people. Right. But it all gets undone by two people corrupted by power trying to seize it. And then it goes in the mountain. Like the whole thing, right? When you think of this being started in World War I, completed in World War II, why his kids there is, it is the tragedy of thinking power is the solution. Right. Yeah. The moment it's not the ultimate solution, then you have to go, what does integrity look like in this when I refuse to deny the value of the other? I don't think I know everything that can make me wholly pure and justified in whatever I do. And I know that if I claim the kind of power to give and take life, that I'm already compromised. Right. Yeah. Like, now, what would we do if we took that seriously to decide what's actually needed in this moment? And that I was like, this is like the most beautiful description of Catholic social teaching put into one of the coolest books. And then somehow a bunch of people that watched the movie probably never read the book. Are like, oh, I love Donald Trump. He's got that Aragorn energy. And you're like, what movie did you watch? He literally is like, you bow to no one guy. Anyway,
no, I think
who would
that's
Donald
exactly
Trump
right.
say that to?
So this is, I think that, like, imagine Hegseth at the meeting, trying to convince him you shouldn't use the ring, right? There's no way Hegseth's going to be like, I can't even, Hegseth can't even conceive of the idea that you should destroy the ring instead of using it. But I do think the other thing that I think you pick up on is that, and that Tolkien is picking up on, is that if you use the ring, you become the evil that you're fighting against, right? And this is one of the interesting things, is that probably the most compelling case for like going to war is that Iran is not run by good people, right? Iran is run by people that do in fact participate in supporting terrorism, who participate in activities that end up targeting civilians, in activities that, right? And so you're like, now that is not actually a justification for the war, because that's an ongoing state of being. In order to have in just war theory a just cause, you need some event that's actually happened, something that they've done that's going to justify it. But I do think that the irony is that the way that you've then gone after Iran has made you de facto somebody who targets civilians, somebody who, like, it makes you into exactly the evil that you think you're fighting against. And that is, I mean, that's Tolkien's thing, is if you pick up the ring, you don't defeat evil, you become evil. And you have failed to understand this. And I think that that's exactly where, for Christians that disagree with that kind of crusading attitude, this is the thing, is you think that you are being righteous, but what you're actually doing is you're confusing yourself with God, which is something you aren't. You're pretending that you can achieve something that you can't. And because you're going after that goal, you're going to end up destroying valuable goods in the world that, you wouldn't have done otherwise. And so I think that's exactly right. I think it's a brilliant allegory for war, which obviously he was like deeply in the middle of, and was like dealing with himself the entire time as he was writing it.
Yeah, and the other whole thing underneath it is the war machine continues to alienate humans from nature, which is actually required for this, like, for sustaining our lives, right? Like, which is like, you don't think about the trees, the whole tree beard sitting there just going like, you've turned everything into a resource for a domination machine.
Yeah,
and now you want our help. You're like. Reasonable.
I mean, this is one of the things, and it's one of the things that's been interesting to watch. I do think if, like, the market turned against Trump would pay attention to it, right? For a long time, but the market just like bumped up the other day. There's if the market actually, like, because there is this, like, economics are have very complicated relations to war. In this case, we're in a situation where Iran's response has been to, like, cut off oil, which should hurt the economy and certainly is going to hurt, like, the average person in the world. But at the same time, war produces a lot of money-making opportunities, particularly if you're, like, in the business of making weapons. If you're making, even Iran after this is going to have to, like, restock all of their stuff going forward. And so the economy is like, well, there's costs, but there's benefits. We kind of balance this stuff out. And I do think that it's one of those things where if it was like that economics were rational or concerned about goods, if the American economy were concerned about human lives, right? That might actually force, like, somebody like Trump to actually change what he's doing, but he doesn't face that. At least he hasn't, to the extent that I suspect we will over the next few years end up facing it. And certainly the average person in the United States and around the world is going to end up facing it, because even if there is money being made off of wars, it's not us who are making it. It's Palantir that's making the money. It's these major corporations that are making the money. It's not the average person in the United States.
A two-part question. So earlier you had addressed rhetoric and the power of these words with enhanced interrogation.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of rhetorical hiding behind your fig leaves, as you talked about, with things like collateral damage or a target-rich environment, you know, and the tactical words that are employed there. There's a danger embedded in even just the way that we talk about these engagements and justifying going to war. But then when you start talking about how profitable it is, it's scary that you both have an upfront facade behind these rhetorical devices and then a profit-making machine behind it that's disguised. I mean, this is really dangerous stuff.
Yeah. But no, I think it is. And I think that, it's always the case that in war, this is another Hauerwas thing, right? In war, truth is the first thing to go, right? Before anybody gets killed, the truth is out of the way. And so there's a truth to that. Like in war, there's always a fog of war. Nobody's sure exactly what's going on. Oftentimes people make mistakes figuring out whether it's a mistake to hit this civilian target or whether it was actually just to try and convince the Iraq or the Iranians to give up is often hard to do. Although, to be fair, Trump has made it much easier by just coming out and saying he's directly attacking civilian targets at times. But
so is like the destruction of civilian factories for civilian production, I don't know, or maybe like people live in a desert, a desalination plant. Like, how just worry is that?
Yeah, no, and this is the thing is that on the one hand, you can see this, you can see the loss of truth here in the fact that like Trump claims that, I mean, he's claimed lots of things for his causes to go to war, but he's claimed that he's going to war on behalf of the Iranian people, right? That what's really happening is the Iranian people hate their government, and so we're going to take it out. We're going to free those Iranian people. We're really going to war for the Iranian people. And there is enough truth to this to make it like, if you don't really understand what's going on, to like sound plausible, because the Iranian people, they have problems with the Ayatollah. They have problems. They have severe, right? There's been lots of protests and the government has killed its own people. But the idea that Trump is going to war on behalf of the Iranian people, but then he'll also say, I'm going to destroy the whole civilization. And it's like, hold on. Didn't you claim earlier that you were going to war on behalf of those people that you are now promising to destroy their civilization? And these two things, somehow, if you listen to Trump enough, you learn just to hold them together in your head so that you don't recognize, hey, both of these things cannot be true, right? It doesn't make any sense to actually put these together. And oftentimes you'll hear people talk about this like, oh, well, you just can't take Trump literally, or you can't take him, like you can't, right? Which is just freedom for them to say, well, I'm just going to set aside some of the things that Trump says, right? And there's no accountability for whatever he's saying, because then you say, well, whatever he's saying, it doesn't make any difference, and I'll just fill it in with what I want it to be. And, and we get rid of any requirement for actually having truth. So to go again to the weird way in which George W. was better than Trump, at least George W. pretended to justify his war to the world. Like, he sent people to make cases in front of the United Nations. Now, a lot of that was just lies, right? But he was not like saying both, oh, this is for the people and we're going to destroy the entire civilization, right? He was at least straightforwardly lying, which Trump can't even manage to do.
Wow.
But it's very postmodern in its own way, in a very bad way.
That cynical way.
Yeah, it's like a cynical postmodernism. Like truth doesn't exist anymore, and so I can just say anything I want and do anything I want, which is like not good postmodernism, which was supposed to make you humble and like recognize the limitations of what you and your ideal system can do. But it's exactly using the kind of weakness of the system to say we're just going to use it to justify whatever the frick I want to do, and I don't need a justification for it anymore. I can just say whatever I want and go out and do it. And again, I don't think anybody's going to stop me. So, well, let's go.
For the past week, Tripp, I've been doing an experiment. Whenever I get upset, like if someone cuts me off in traffic or I hear a news story that I don't like, I yell, "Open the effing strait, you crazy bastards." And, you know, it's surprisingly therapeutic. Honestly, it releases some endorphins or something. Yeah. And it really does. It helps.
I find that the block button does that for me on social media. That I get a little shot of endorphin when I hit the block. I don't have to see you anymore. You've disappeared to me. Okay.
I have a question that I want to know what you think. You can channel your Christian realist energy.
Yeah.
Okay. So last week I was at Trinity Western University doing a lecture series. It was part of the, it was Mennonite funded. So it is on nonviolence and metaphysics and such. And, one of the fun things of being there, other than you're in Canada and it was beautiful in Vancouver.
Yeah.
What is talking to Canadians? Cause since the last time I was there, we've really reworked our relationship with him. Now, Bo's a dual citizen, so he's got dual loyalties here. So I can't really trust.
Right, we'll set him as the biased participant.
Yeah.
As opposed to us Americans. Yeah. I mean, we're
when you think of the dual loyalty problem in our foreign policy, the
Canadian citizenship, first thing that comes to mind.
Absolutely. Not the one true democracy in the Middle East. So,
I'd like to see you build a wall on that border.
Yeah. Maybe could you imagine? It would be hilarious. Half the Canadians would probably start helping. They're like, this is fine.
Yeah, right? You guys stay down there.
Yeah, okay. We got this. But at Davos in January, the Canadian Prime Minister does this speech, right? Where he says, like, the old world is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it, have nostalgia. It's not a strategy. And what Trump was performing in public, right, without the guise of international cooperation, the post-war order, all these kinds of things, he's like, this is a rupture, not a transition.
Yeah.
And he goes through and gives examples of, like, look, we all know this was a racket. We've just been playing along with it because we figure this racket's better than what the other options are.
Yeah.
But if you're threatening, take Greenland and Canada, and you're just like bombing random fishing boats and being like, well, most of them were probably had drugs, doing all this kind of stuff, like in tariffs, you're like, come on. He vocalized my deep suspicion of the rhetoric of late Niebuhr about the glory, where his confidence in this post-war order. Now, in Kearney, who is a nice economic neoliberal of the centrist variety, is saying it. So I wonder, like, as a realist, like, what do we get? How does our ethical reflection around global order change when all these countries that have been performing the game are like, we can't do this anymore? Or take Spain, it's like, you're not flying out of here. Or the neighbors of Iran who've let us had military bases, even though they're theocratic dictatorships, are like, hey, I thought this was part of the deal. We invested in your son-in-law gave him million. Like, what's the status of the post-war order? And when you think hypothetically in, after 28, there's a new American leader that at least liked it and had some respect for it. But if it's a real rupture and we can't go back, or if the collective performance of the story that justify it is like hard to forget, because you could always be 4 years away of another person in charge here that throws it under. Like, how's that changing the way you think of the order? And feel free to give more background, but I've had that conversation with a bunch of Canadian religion and politics professors, and I'm interested in how the Christian realist is thinking right now.
About 5 years ago, I wrote an article for a book that's like the future of Christian realism, that's on international affairs. And one of the questions I raised in that article was whether we should want a continued American kind of dominance in the international world. Now, at the time, it was Joe Biden had just been elected, Trump had been set to the side, and I gave it a qualified, I think a lot depends on where America goes at this point. But I think that the Western democratic liberal tradition still has a lot to offer to the international world, and that the dream of a kind of liberal international order that has dominated since World War II still has something to offer. And so I think that that's an important thing to offer. I think that de facto, even at that time, as I said in the article, the international situation was shifting so that you were really having the rise of China as another possibility, and you were having Russia as a kind of a person that an actor that could reach in and mess enough stuff up for the others that it could influence which of China and America were having the most success in the world. I still think that is a fair picture. Since then, there's a political scientist named Eikenberry who's done work who imagines that there's a kind of Western power which is still represented by Europe, could be represented by the United States if it gets its act together, that there is a anti-Western order, which is represented by Russia and China. And then he says there's the developing world, and what the Western and the non-Western are competing for the developing world to see what direction they're going to go. Now, what throws a wrench into that entire thing is thinking that America still represents that liberal order. And I think that under Trump, it has really become so that Trump is functionally anti-democracy, anti-liberal, anti all of those things. And honestly, as a Christian realist, I become a little bit of a follower of Bonhoeffer at that point.
Lord.
I don't have that much power in this situation. But Bonhoeffer famously said, right, there's a point at which you have to pray for your own country to lose. And to the extent that, and at least while Trump is in power, I think there is an extent to which I have to pray that my country loses.
Wow.
I think that the United States is incredibly powerful. I don't know that the United States will lose because I think it's got so much reserve power that it's going to take a long time to wind down. I don't think that I want China either to be in charge, right? So I'm not rooting for China or rooting for Russia. At this point, I'm probably rooting for Europe and Canada to do something, although they have their own problems that they're dealing with at this time. I would like to see that liberal order continue, but I don't know what its prospects are for the future. As a realist, I'm really more and more pessimistic as we go about whether we can maintain that. And I mean, honestly, I'm myself So like I think it's a traditional position that like democracy is the best form of government, right? But looking at, I mean, Trump was democratically elected. I don't think that I don't think that that's false, and I think democracies are incredibly open to the influence of nationalism and racism and things like that that can lead a majoritarian group to like take over and so I'm kind of like, look, we've got to figure out what is like best that we can do at the current time. And currently I'm like, okay, so what that looks like in the immediate future is freaking get Republicans out as much as you can in the midterms, hopefully get somebody that's better in the future, but then start thinking about how you can change the system as a whole, because the system isn't working for the good inside the United States. And we've got to figure out how we can change the system if we're going to change anything else. Whether we'll be able to have the power to change that system is a good question. But that's the direction we have to head at this point.
So interesting. You know, in that speech, Mark Carney said something that's getting quoted a lot right now, which is that for middle-sized countries, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yeah.
And it is part of the new world order is coming to terms with the fact that you can't just be the little fish that cleans off the back of the shark, right? Mm-hmm. Like these symbiotic relationships that have been established over the 100, 200 years of the past are falling apart because the shark is just chewing up everything right now.
Yeah. No, and this is in part, and I do think that there's a realist analysis of this, which makes a lot of sense, which was that the United States got a kind of became faux moral. Okay. Because of World War II, we went to war with the Nazis. Mm-hmm. The Nazis were really bad. And for a time, we had to think of ourselves as not the Nazis, right? And there's a whole generation where we're not the Nazis. That helped. And that helped, jumpstart the civil rights movement. It helped jumpstart a whole bunch of positive developments in the United States. Then we ended up against the communists. And it's like, we're not the communists didn't work as well as we're not the Nazis, because that allowed for a kind of growth of the emphasis on like capitalism, individualism, free market, and we forgot a lot of the lessons that we'd learned from the Great Depression across that period. And that kind of ends with like Reagan coming to power. And then we lose the thing that we're against. And as soon as we lose the thing that we're against, as a realist, we know as soon as human beings are mostly held together by what they don't like, we're very rarely held together by what we love. And so the United States, when we don't have a unified enemy to be against, we tend to turn against each other. And we turn against each other, and this ends up leading to partisanship that then escalates out of control, especially with the Republican Party that was already on this kind of messed up trajectory to start with, and just allows them to get out of control. And in part, as a realist, this is one of the reasons that I'm not incredibly hopeful. I don't know what reestablishes a kind of power balance that both unifies the United States and unifies it in a way that gives us a moral identity. How do you do that, right? Because in a weird way, Nazism did the greatest favor that it could to the United States by giving us a unifying identity that also gave us the ability to claim to be moral, because we were not the Nazis. And now we're back to a place where we got literal Nazis running around inside the United States, and some of them are in the government. So yeah. I don't know exactly what the future holds. I pray that God will allow some shift of power that allows us to gain back some of that appearance of morality, even if we don't really have the morality at some point, right?
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
No, I was just gonna say, I don't know how much time we have with Kevin, but I want to save space for 2 60-second questions at the end.
All right. I had one more topic I was just going to prompt him to riff on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So recently, Bart Ehrman's new book, The Triumph of Christianity, right? And looking at the Stranger, where he's looking at the teachings of Jesus. He does a very similar thesis to Tom Holland's in Dominion, where, to argue that basically the moral furniture of the modern West, even its like secular, liberal, supposedly universal values, are fundamentally Christian in origin, right? And in both of them, who, neither one of them are like, I'm a Christian. They're like, I'm a historian and I'm a biblical scholar and stuff, professional of early Christianity. And they once you identify the cross dead one as the revelation of the good life, then all these features of Roman culture, values, goodness, and stuff get mutated to the point everyone else has just sucked them in, right?
Yeah.
And the thing, Holland and Bart in recent interviews have made the same observation, that Donald Trump is the first American president who does not know this and doesn't even feel the need to genuflect to it.
Yeah.
And they're both dumbfounded that a large portion of the American church doesn't notice that the first non-Western, non-Christian, you can't find a bone of it in his body president is their like Cyrus resentment protector. And so like to me, one of the things I'm interested in is like, what do we do when when a growing portion of the church does not even have like the basic universalist values that Jesus introduced to the West, and they're claiming his inheritance and authority to undermine it globally and at home, right? Like the idea that a nonviolent protesting citizen is executed by the state and you label it a domestic terrorist is like the archetype of it's not even just it's not only not true abroad, it's not true here. And so like the more you get people that aren't even Christian going, I think it would be good at least the Christians understand that y'all were the ones that helped everyone else out in the West that aren't even in this. The reason we care about the girls at the girls' school in Iran or a protesting mother in Minneapolis and all, and that no one thinks the thing we all think is odd is that you aren't worried about it. Like that situation to me is one where because you mentioned Bonhoeffer, like that moment where he went, early on in Church and the Jewish Question, he's like, the church, look, we know what we need to do here. It's our vocation to witness to the state. And then he goes, and then later he goes, the state's failed. Now we have to be rigorous disciples in a broken state. And then he's like, the church now, like he writes cost of discipleship, all that kind of stuff. And then the church has failed and been co-opted. Now I have to figure out as a follower of Jesus what I do in this situation. And that's where he gets to the line you mentioned, right? Like praying for the destruction of my own country for its ultimate well-being, right? He's praying because it has given up the basis of Western Christendom's greatest gift to an ideology that is like Mein Kampf style. Well, there's three types of people. There's Aryans, there's our latch-ons, that are trying to imitate us, and they could be good, like the Italians or the Japanese. They understand that we're the best. And then there's all the others that could be rounded up. They're basically domestic terrorists because they might breed with our population. To me, we're at one of these situations in America where not just the failure of the state's a question if you're a Christian, but the failure of the church. And like as an ethicist trying to think about engaging the public square, and resonating with Bonhoeffer's prayer when he realized the state and the church has failed. Like, how does that change the way you think about faithfulness for Christians that are tax-paying citizens?
So first, let me say something about Ehrman, which I think his recent book is rhetorically brilliant. In that he is an agnostic, usually known as like a critic of the idea that you actually have that the Bible actually, reliably reflects Jesus's. And so there's this whole like oftentimes evangelicals will be like, Ehrman's like really bad. But what evangelicals want most is for somebody to have a legitimate biblical scholar come out and say, you know what? I think there was something that was actually great and good and distinctive that came out of Jesus. And even as like an agnostic or an atheist, I can't deny that this good thing came out. And so he gives them that, right? Where he's like, as an agnostic, I'm going to let you off. Like, you're right. There was this incredible thing that came out of Jesus. And you know what it was? It's exactly what you're not doing. And I think that the rhetoric, like the rhetorical force of that book, I think is awesome. And I think that's exactly what he's trying to do. Is I think that he's trying to say, look, I'm gonna give you actually what you like, the most important theological thing I could give you, which is like, if you wanted to claim a divine revelation, this is where you would claim it. You would claim that Jesus is giving you a divine revelation, and that revelation is that you should love everyone, right? And you know what you're exactly not doing is the one thing that is actually a thing that you could make a case for as a revelation. And so I find that fascinating. In terms of what we should do, it's difficult to say. As I say, I'm not sure for the future. I do have a fascinating question that bugs me as a scholar, because as a scholar, I always want to be really careful and be like, oh, Christianity has lots of different forms. Christianity, there is this like crusader mentality that shows up in Christianity at some point, right? And so even when I'm critiquing conservatives, I don't usually go to the claim, oh, that's not Christian, right? I'll nuance it and be like, I got to be careful about exactly what I say. I do wonder if we don't need a resurgence of something that's not so nuanced. Something that is a more, and I think you see this somewhat with like James Tallarico, right? Who is in his own way, like he looks, if you just looked at him, you'd be like, this guy is straight down the line evangelical white man from Texas, right? And the way he tends to talk about the Bible is not terribly nuanced, but he's like agreeing with Ehrman that the central revelation is you were supposed to love everybody, right? And he is then not making all the qualifications about suggesting, yeah, these people, these evangelicals aren't really Christian. They just aren't following the Bible. They aren't. And that's the thing that I, as a scholar, always like, I put these kind of barriers in my way from saying that. Right? Because I recognize the ways in which that's kind of problematic, and it creates its own barriers and it does its own thing. But I do think that for people that have that kind of Christianity that need okay, this is what the Bible says and I'm going to follow it. We need a version of Christianity that gives them, this is what the Bible says, and the Bible says you're supposed to love other people, right? And the Bible makes these claims, and we should be investing in, care for the poor in our society. And so I appreciate what Tallarico is doing.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing that I do, but I do like value it, in that I think that and this is one of the reasons that he is so annoying to these evangelicals, while they're annoyed at him in a way that they're not annoyed at, say, me. Because with me, they can just be like, oh, that's a scholar. He's spent too much time in college. He's become an elite. Ignore the fact that he's from Kansas and he lives in Missouri. He's obviously a coastal elite, right? Really, at the end of the day. And they can't do that with Tallarico. And this is one of the reasons that you see kind of evangelical leaders like Josh Howerton like getting so frustrated with Tallarico, is because he's speaking the same language, but in an inverse way that I think is really fascinating. And so I'm curious about that. And if you could get that off the ground, I know that like Jim Wallace and Sojourners and like has been trying to do that for a long time. I'm curious, especially as people become kind of disenchanted with Trump, if there's not an opening for that, for an alternative kind of Christianity that is like a liberal evangelicalism. Right?
That's really interesting.
So yeah, I'm curious about that, and I'll be curious to watch it.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting thought. I mean, one of the things that Tripp and I have been talking about for 12 years is the problem of, we call it liberal laryngitis. Tony Jones calls it the prolegomena. Everything is throat clearing,
Yep.
And James Tallarico doesn't have any of that hesitation. He has that kind of soft confidence that you don't see often when you're dealing with people from that stream of the Christian family.
Yeah, no,
and I think, especially in white liberal churches, because I think the black tradition is much better at doing it.
Yes,
right. Like Raphael Warnock doesn't have a problem doing it, but he also wrote a PhD with James Cone with all the nuance in the footnotes, right? So there's something about being a proclaimer of the gospel from the margins that will make things rhetorically clear in ways that the habits of mainline Protestantism that were internalized when we were culture dominant, we valued like nuance and masking deep commitments with footnotes, speaking in third person and these kinds of things. So I like there's more resonance when Tallarico talks to the prophetic black church tradition. I wish there was even more, but
no, I mean, I think it's right, but I also think that it's valuable that, and in some ways Tallarico is drawing on a deep tradition in white evangelicalism. I mean, that if you go back before like the 1970s, 1980s, if you go back to the kind of populist, anti-capitalist evangelicalism of some of you could go in two different directions, right? You could have gone towards racism, or you could have gone towards anti-capitalism, and Southern evangelicalism went towards racism. And it's interesting to imagine a world in which Southern evangelicalism went anti-capitalist as their direction after the Civil War, instead of being like, nah, we're going to stick with this like this racist like tone that we're going to take. It would have been fascinating to see that, and in some ways, that's what Tallarico is picking up on and pushing. And I find it fascinating. I actually think like my take is, if you're smart enough, then go on and do all the footnotes. And like there are Christians who need that. There are Christians who are going to be like, are going to enjoy that. And there are people, and it'll also allow you to engage with non-Christians in a particular way that say that rhetoric won't. But I really do think that we also need something for people that are like, nope, I'm just, I had a person who messaged me the other day and said, my girlfriend is evangelical and she can't follow you to the place where you're like, you know what? The Bible is not infallible. The Bible is contradictory. So he was like, what could you give me to have her read that would give her a more kind of progressive tilt, but she doesn't have to accept the Bible's got contradictions in it? At which point I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, absolutely. Go read Sojourners. Go, go pick up Pete Enns is really good at like giving you a kind of soft intro to a whole bunch of that stuff without like the kind of hard edge of the Bible's, no, it's got contradictions in it, right? And so it was an interesting question that somebody was like, yeah, she kind of likes, where you go with it, but she doesn't like all the, oh, this isn't really, you're giving up on an evangelical doctrine of revelation. And I'm like, okay, yeah, well, no, I can understand that. And I'll give you where you should go for that too. So, yeah.
Hey, before we wrap up, I have just two things I've been distracted by during this awesome time. Kevin, to your right on the bookshelf behind you, there's a red, white, and blue binding to a book. Is there any chance that's the Metaphysical Club?
Yeah. Yes.
I thought you were going to say the Trump Bible. But
yes. No, that is the Metaphysical Club that's sitting back there. Yes.
I can't tell you how much that book has meant to me over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And it has the most iconic cover, that binding.
Yeah.
And when you first came on and I saw it behind you, I was like, if that's the Metaphysical Club, this guy you're climbing so much with me.
So my dissertation was on Reinhold Niebuhr and Paul Ramsey, and the way that Reinhold Niebuhr was representative of the pragmatic tradition in America, and Paul Ramsey was representative of the idealistic tradition in America, and how that shaped their arguments with each other and how they engage with each other. So I lived in the Metaphysical Club for a long time during grad school, and that also then became my first book, which is Reinhold Niebuhr and Paul Ramsey. So yeah, no, I have spent a long time with the pragmatists and that tradition.
I am buzzing right now. I have a whole collection of books that I don't have anybody to talk to about the books, and this is one of them.
Yeah,
and so to see
it's a great book too. It introduces pragmatism in a way that's like accessible and gives you like a historical development.
I'm going to go back and read it.
Figures. Oh yeah, it's a great book.
Second question: have you engaged the work of Gordon Kaufman at all?
So yeah, although it's been a long time since I did anything with Gordon Kaufman. Yeah, I'm ambivalent about Kaufman. In a way that so here's the thing. I never like the conservative liberal theological dichotomies that we often get into, right? Because I tend to think that we're all part of this evolving Christian tradition, and that it goes along and it all picks up on some stuff and it all leaves behind some stuff. And Kaufman really celebrates leaving behind some of the stuff in a way that he's involved in a progressive narrative where he tends to celebrate the new and the leaving off of the old,
right?
In a way that while I do, right, I of course we're all moving in time and we're all picking up new stuff and we're all leaving it off. I also want to emphasize my continuity with what's come before in a way that Kaufman doesn't.
Right.
And so in a really fascinating way, I have deep sympathies with Kaufman, and yet I worry about the exact framing that he puts on his theology.
I am so happy I asked this question.
So here, I know one of Bo's favorite books is Kaufman's early one, The Theology for a Nuclear Age, that came out of his AAR presidential address the year I was born, 1982.
Yeah.
Which is different than when he started talking to me about Kaufman. What goes through my head is like the later stuff where he's trying to see how much he can squeeze with a deep fidelity to Kant about confessional theology's limits.
Right.
Because he's saying, he gives this argument, right, to all the scholars of religion, not just Christians or theologians and such, that once we've gotten to the nuclear age, there's a fundamental reconstruction of theology and the task of those that are handing on the traditions, because we possess the power to destroy all life on the earth.
Right.
And that's something that any of the wisdom traditions didn't have as a live option. Right. Maybe God had it and used a flood and then said, my bad.
And the Constitution never conceived of.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so to me, there's this the like that address was trying to name the inherent differences of what if you're a steward of a tradition, you now have questions that you know and have to admit that the tradition has not asked before,
right?
Which means your task as a constructive, scholar doing kind of constructive reflection is like, what do these traditions gift to a question they didn't know was a potential one to raise? And I think that book and that part of him, I think, is really true. I just think John Cobb did a better job answering it,
Throwing elbows at the end. Listen, my God.
Let me just throw in 3 show notes that I think are entertaining. We have a rule: you can't talk about Lord of the Rings in the first hour. And Tripp, he waited till hour 11, 1 hour and 11 minutes before he did that. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Oh no, I already thought of it, put it onto my notes just to wait till I knew.
That was so
we
good.
Were an hour in.
It was perfect, bro. It was really perfect. Secondly, we almost made it through a whole episode without Bonhoeffer. And then when you brought it up, I don't know if you heard, I actually took the Lord's name in vain because I was like, oh my God. I thought if somebody else brings it up, it's going to open the door for Tripp. But if he brings it up, then I can be like, dude, it feels a little forced, right? But you brought it up.
Yeah.
And now we've made it to the end of the episode, and we finally have a John Cobb reference.
There you go. It had to come.
We have hit the trifecta today.
I also want to know that Colton on the Substack chat was channeling Tripp's inner marks. That is another thing. Bill's like, we really got to limit how many episodes that happens because 30 minutes goes by and you're still going. But Colton in Substack chat said, when we were talking about white liberal Protestants' difference in the black church, he said, I think it might have something to do with white liberals actually just being the pressure valve for the violence of capitalism. Their purpose is to keep the system of oppression running smoothly, not to dismantle it. And I can't put Substack quotes up on.
You know who that is, though?
I don't know, someone that knew exactly
Chris
what
Hedges. That's Chris Hedges.
Well, it's also just the large. It's also I would say Martin Luther King
fascinatingly
Jr.
enough was one of Reinhold Niebuhr's students.
Yeah, Chris Hedges,
which is
the Union.
Yeah, has its own like personal history there, which is like just weird.
Interesting.
But,
hey, and can I just, my final thought for the day is, I would much rather have the Substack conversation up on the screen than this YouTube thing that's happening.
Oh yeah, we had someone come up to lecture us, but he's left. If you had been in UK for even 10 minutes lately, you would be supporting your president all the way. Next comment: did you see what they did to the Twin Towers? Third comment: they are precisely no Nazis in your government. Fourth comment: your continued use of Nazi terminology is an insult to all those who fought in the Second World War. I'm out of here before your warped ideology rubs off on me.
Yeah,
that's by you, Kevin.
Okay, so here's the thing. I love
we have
British
solid
television.
ideology.
I love, like, there's like Taskmaster, there's these like these British shows that I really love. I've been really into lately. There's the House of Games that's over there, and I love these. And I have to remind myself after watching them every once in a while that Britain also has like these horrible racist, like xenophobic, like tendencies that we have, because I find myself becoming enamored of like British culture when I watch these shows, and I'm like, oh my God, they're so great. And I'm like, oh no, remember, they also have like people who are clearly like redneck Britons that I really have to remind myself once in a while.
I just would let everyone know I did live in Scotland 3 years, which is a special part of the UK because for all other reasons, they have similar judgments of the rest of the UK, but probably not ones our commenter had. Like, they were really mad. They were forced to leave the European Union.
Oh yeah.
They and also they're like, can't we be like Ireland and still be a part of the EU?
Right.
And let y'all all you people freaking out about Muslims moving to our country. y'all can just take a chill pill. But it might be that you really have to be like Scottish or been there a long time to want to live there for 6 months of the year. And it's a deterrent for people from the global South to immigrate there, because they realize that there are human beings that choose to live in darkness until 9 a.m.
Right.
and it start again at 3. And like when I lived there, I love Scotland. There are plenty of things about that place where I wish we had it. Only thing I always wonder about is like, I realize how American I am about free speech when they get kind of weird about that stuff. But if your neighbors are taxi drivers and they can own a home, and you trust a not even very well run NHS enough that you don't have protests during COVID, and the social safety net works radically well, and all these kinds of things, you're like, I didn't feel all my freedom and liberty suck out of me. Why can't we try this? Which is ever since, and I mean, I always had intellectual critiques of capitalists, but then you're just like, you get there and you go, oh, they thought democracy might actually include something other than the voting mechanism. Like economics should be included in the space that you want democracy. And so, sadly, our commenters wrong. Like, I lived there 3 years and then thought, well, I can go back to the States. Joe Biden won.
Yeah.
And see how that worked.
Mistake.
I had more confidence in my fellow Americans than was justified.
Yeah.
Then Kevin's thinking, see, that's what you get. You start minimizing sin, Tripp, and then
happens.
you come back here on purpose.
Mistake.
Now we need Kevin to tell people where they can connect with him, and then then Bo can do his benediction. We do benedictions here, and I'm not going to ruin how they happen, Kevin. So you get a firsthand experience.
All right. So if you are interested in following me or hearing more from me, I'm available on TikTok. I'm available on Instagram. I have a Substack, which I have not been good about keeping up with. But for the most part, you can Google me and you can find, if you're interested in going to college, Central Methodist University. Again, it's not the Philadelphia Eagles. We're in the middle of Missouri. So I'm all over the place.
Oh, and Kevin's coming to hang out with us at Theology Beer Camp.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't even know exactly what the most pressing ethical question's going to be at camp, but there will be a big ethics section. But we have some really cool other ethicists that are going to be at camp. You gave a John Wayne shout out. Kristen's going to be there. Mm-hmm. Gary Dorian's going to be there. Stacey Floyd Thomas, Cornell West. I'm just saying, like, the ethics, that the when it gets to like thinking about ethics, like that is going to make for a diversity of perspectives that all don't suck.
No, that's like an all-star list and me. That's so cool.
Yeah, but you're the only TikTok superstar.
Oh, that might be. I probably have bigger TikTok following.
I know people are always like, why don't you start getting influencers to come? And I'm like, well, that would require me to look at social media more to know who they are.
Yeah, know who it is.
But I've read Kevin's books and talked to him in 2-hour conversations, so I know what's up.
Yeah,
because you give the wrong influencer a microphone and you don't know what happens.
Oh yeah, no.
They're just like, oh. Anyway, I'm not going to make an aside towards influence.
I'm not going to name any names.
No, why would I do that? I don't need people coming after me in videos I don't want to watch. All right, Bo.
You ready? Say your prayers, take your vitamins, open the effing straight, you crazy bastards, and I'll see you in Valhalla.